and welcome to a new episode of the Yarnflakes Podcast. My name is Audrey and I am a knitwear designer from the southwest of France. This is a podcast where I talk about all of my fiber arts makes. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you are doing well. I have three little things to share with you. Not so little, but three projects to share with you this episode. I have a new pattern for little ankle socks. I have a finished object, which is a crochet garment that I'm wearing, and I will have a new work in progress, which is a lace summer top. So that's the program for this time. Thank you for joining me, and you can find timestamps for all the different sections of the podcast in the description. So if you want to skip a section or find a project in particular, this is where you should look. I also put links to everything that I talk about, the patterns and the yarns that I will be mentioning, as well as my own social media, pattern shops, and my Patreon page if you would like to support my work and have access to some behind the scenes and other content. So I'm going to start with a new design that I just published on Ravelry, which is the Quilisma Socks. So these are short ankle socks, although you can of course make the leg longer to your preference. And yes, they are worked cuff down with a picot edge and this lace and cable motif down the front leg and top of the foot. And yeah, this is actually the lace that I used in my Quilisma shawl, which is this design here, which is a shawl design that I published, I don't remember, I think it was 2021, maybe it was just last year, but it is a one skein shawl or more, because you can actually keep knitting until you're finished with your yarn, and it's a fine shawl featuring the same lace pattern. And you have a little bit of garter stitch at the end, and this is it. I really like this motif, and what's fun with this is that it's very easy to knit and it's very easy to see where you are because you have vertical bands, and so I thought it would be interesting to put it on a sock, and so I managed to make it into a panel, and there we are. So the lace is both charted and written, so you can choose the instructions that you're more comfortable with. It's not a complicated lace by any means. There are simple eyelets decreases. There is a center double decrease here, but it's fairly easy to do. This is a simple undulating cable. And for the bubbles, you have a video tutorial in the pattern that shows you how I make my bubble. Yeah, speaking of bubbles in socks, I sometimes get questions, because I know it's a bit weird, whether or not it's actually comfortable to wear in shoes. So I personally, I have another design, the Atlantica socks, which have a lot more bubbles than this. I'm gonna try to put the picture here if I remember. And I have been wearing them in various different shoes, in boots, like more firm boots with laces, and in sneakers, either normal city sneakers or hiking sneakers. Like, the style was not great, especially since my Atlantica socks are lime green, but comfort-wise, for me it's okay. I'm not bothered by the bubbles. I feel them, but it's not an issue for me, no matter the shoes. And the thing is, it's very personal, and I know some people have very sensitive comfort level in their feet. It's just so personal. Sometimes even just too thick of a yarn, like DK weight socks, or just slightest motif, like if you feel like the ridges of something that is not plain stock in it, sometimes it can be very uncomfortable. So bubbles, hard no if that's your case. But yeah, you kind of have to try to see how you feel about it. Worst case scenario, you have socks that you can wear at home. But if you don't want to do the socks, you can totally remove them. This design is not losing so much if you remove the bubbles. Some people have knitted the shawl already without the bubbles, so it does work. And there are testers who made the socks without bubbles. You still have the undulating cable, and so you don't lose anything in the motif. Unlike perhaps the Atlantica socks that I just mentioned, where I think if you remove the bubbles, you lose a big angular point of the design. So yeah, here you don't need to make the bubbles if you don't want them. But yeah, and so another little point, they are knitted cuff down. You have 2 heels options in the pattern, either a heel flap and gusset or short row heel, German short row heel. It's all written in the pattern. And for the picot edge, the way I do my picot edge is that I cast on my stitches normally. I use a German twisted cast on. You could use a long tail cast on if it's elastic enough for you. You work the picot motif, which is just knitting stockinette, making a row of eyelets, and then you fold it over, and basically you attach the live stitches to the cast on stitches. So this can be a bit fiddly. It's not particularly difficult. I've always had beginners try it and they were fine. It's just that you need to see where the cast on stitches are. So if you're not comfortable reading your stitches, that may need a little bit of focus. You might be tempted to do a provisional cast on, and I don't recommend this. I have now 3 sock patterns with picot edges, and every time a tester tried the provisional cast on, they agreed with me. It's too loose, basically. Since you don't have a ribbing, which would have a cinching elastic effect, if you do a provisional cast on, you have nothing holding the edge, and so it tends to flop, and it doesn't hold well your ankle or your leg. So I don't recommend making the provisional cast on. You can try. It's always very personal tension-wise, so it might work for you. In general, when someone tells you not to do something, you should do it. So that at least you know, if indeed it doesn't work, well, you know why. But it might work for you. It depends on your tension. If you're making them longer and they end up being on your calf, and maybe you have a bit of a stronger calf, you might benefit from something being looser. But in general, I recommend doing an actual cast on for a picot edge like this for a sock. So yes, I used the contrast color for the picot edging and for the toe. The theme of this year, I'm making a little sock collection, and these are the second designs in this collection, and I wanted to play with color, and most of the designs will just be adding stripes or color blocking so that you can make them however you want. If you just want them one plain color, or if you want to do the heel in contrast as well, that'll be fun. But I wanted to play a little bit with these, and I have used Filcolana Arweta, which is a blend of superwash merino and nylon, which is a very soft fingering weight sock yarn, which I really like for about anything, but they do work well for socks for me. I have quite a few pairs now, and they wear pretty well. You do have a little bit of a halo at first because they are very soft, but I haven't noticed peeling especially, and they do have a good definition. Look, it's so lovely. So this is the coral colorway, the mustard colorway, which I thought looked fun together. Yeah, so these are the Quilisma socks, and I hope you enjoyed them. And if you do, they are now available, and there is a little discount on Ravelry. You have 15% off. until Sunday with the code Quilisma Socks, I think. That is what I will choose, even if it's a bit long. But it will be written in the description down below. So, yeah, I hope you like them. And yes, that is it for the pattern propaganda. And I'm going to move on to a finished work in progress. I think it's been a while since I didn't show you a finished work in progress for some reason. But here it is. I have been learning how to crochet. That is my goal in the next few years, is to get my crochet skill a little bit up. I have very minimal crochet experience, and I have been I have been crocheting this garment, and it is now finished. This is the Beatrice V-neck cardigan from Hollywoodward Designs, which is a UK-based designer which makes beautiful crochet garments, and here it is. I am very happy with it. So it's not perfect, obviously. It doesn't have to be perfect. I hate when people say it's not perfect. And I just did it. But I will talk about the little things that I think I could try and focus on improving. But it is very nice. I'm pretty happy with it. Like, my first knitted garment, it wasn't this good. You know, if you can think of some experimental design from stylist style design and couture stuff, yeah, it kind of looked like this. Whereas this is totally wearable and perfect for now, for the spring. It's exactly what I needed. So I have used Katia Yarn's Cotton in Love, which is a blend of 50% merino and 50% cotton. And this is the 51 colorway. And I really like it. It's a nice soft yarn. It didn't split too much, even though I was crocheting and not used to it. So I think it would be lovely even knitted. It's not too heavy for a yarn with such cotton. And I actually didn't use that much yarn. I used a bit less than 1,200 meters. 1,200, I don't know. 1,200, yeah. I always think that 1,200 means 12,000. I always get confused with that, but 1,200 meters, which is about 520 grams, which sounds like a lot, but actually, if I compare it to my knitted cardigans, like an all-over textured DK weight knitted cardigan, it's about the same. So I didn't use a lot more yarn. I think because the treble crochet, which is a double crochet in the US, is a bit loose and airy, so yeah, and it's I think that's also why. So the cardigan is not really heavy, like it's not super lightweight because of the cotton, but I personally don't mind to feel my clothes. Feels kind of like a weighted blanket. But it's really not dragging at all. So I was quite surprised with that. And yeah, really smooth yarn. I'm pretty pleased with this. So the cardigan is worked in parts. So you make the back, you make the two fronts with the decreases, and then you make the sleeves in the round, and then you pick up stitches for the button band here, and you seam everything together. I think last time I showed you that I did a modification, which is that I didn't want to seam the sleeves here because I would have had to seam on an edge that wasn't neat, like here basically, and you can see how this is not a really pretty seam. And I know myself, if I had to do this on a circular area, it would have been a lot worse. So what I actually did is that I seamed the shoulders and I picked up stitches around the armhole to work the sleeves like this. And I'm very happy that I did this because this is so much prettier. And yeah, so that is how I've done it. So, compared to last time, I have learned how to make this little ribbing, which was really fun. So you do a little bit of decreases to make this nice balloon thing. And then you actually work the ribbing sideways. So I don't know how I understood this. It's a miracle because it's not really described in the pattern. She tells you to chain, to make a bit of a longer chain. And then she tells you to DC in the chain. So you do double crochet for the ribbing. And which is single crochet US. And I don't know why I don't know how I understood immediately that I needed to go sideways. I was quite impressed with myself. Basically, you go back and forth, and every time you attach it to the edge here. It just made me think of a shawl edge, so I think that's why I, for some reason, figured it out, and I wasn't confused for very long. But you do double crochet on the front loop only, which is really interesting. So instead of taking the entire V, you only take the front loop, and it makes this nice vertical line effect. However, for the button band, the pattern only says double crochet, and I was confused for a little bit because I didn't know if I couldn't zoom in the pictures. It was a bit blurry, and I couldn't tell if that was correct. But the pattern only doesn't say front loop here, so maybe it's intentional, and that's just my brain, who doesn't like to mix ribbing. Like, I don't mind if you have like an I-cord edging on the neckline and then the rest is ribbing, but if there's different ribbing in the pattern, it sort of bugs me for some reason. But yeah, the pattern says to do normal crochet, double crochet here, so that's what I did. I think it looks nice still. So you pick up the stitches, and that's like one of the first defects that I can see, is that it's not very neat where I picked up here, right? Especially on the decreasing edge, but also kind of here. This is because like it's very neat on the back, of course, because I had like neat V's, but on the sides here it was kind of like the same edging that you end up having here on the sleeve, because you're working sideways. And that side edge is also what I had to seam here. I just have a harder time reading it, especially with the decreases, because you have quite a lot of the trebles clasped together, and I sort of couldn't tell exactly where to place my hook. And so it's not the neatest, it's still very fine, right? But yeah, maybe I could try and focus on making something with a thicker yarn and experiment a bit with this to try and get this to be neater. The other sort of defect, other than general tension issues, like in some places it looks like I have holes because my tension is not smooth, but that's normal, is again the button band. I had to make it much longer because my row gauge is wrong. My row gauge was wrong, and this meant that I had to make a lot more rows on the back, the front, and also on the sleeves. Like the recommended rows on the sleeves, there's really not a lot. Even if I did the proportion with my row gauge, like it didn't work. I had to like double the amount of rows on the sleeves, and I still made only bracelet length sleeves, right? But so because my row gauge was denser, if I worked the button band as instructed, it would have been very small, much too small. So I needed to lengthen it, and the thing is, to lengthen a button band, you need to add rows before the button and after the button in a equal manner, because if not, you're gonna move where the button is, and you might end up with something that pulls or that is wavy, and didn't want that. And the thing is, I felt like I had to do 2 rows completely, because I didn't want to offset where the buttonhole is. So the buttonhole is done by you just skip some double crochets and you chain and you make a hole. It's actually quite big of a hole, so I hope it's not gonna get too loose. And I didn't want to do this not on the side that the pattern called for, and I wanted to complete the rows ending on the right side like the pattern says. Maybe it didn't matter, but basically I had to add 2 rows before and 2 rows after, and so now it's a little bit too big, I think, for my taste. I added my metallic buttons, which I don't think are heavy. I don't feel it pulling so much, but just in case I let the threads very loose so that I can just change them if I feel like it. But yeah, it means that my button band is a bit too big. It also still has a little bit of the point of the blocking, which is gonna get smoother with time. But yeah, you have to work in creases here to form the V, and I think it's not really well balanced. Now it also kind of creates a little bit of a point here, which is actually fine. I thought maybe I should have done decreases here at the shoulder line, but actually as I'm wearing it and it's pulling a bit to the front, it does stay flat, so that's fine. And yeah, that is it. I am very happy with it and I had lots of fun. And yeah, thank you again everyone for your advice, for your recommendation. You gave me lots of inspiration crochet wise, and yeah, I've been learning a lot looking at the tutorials that you've sent, so that's great. And yeah, I already know what project I want to make next in crochet. I hope so, because it's a summer top, and I hope I'll have time to make it this summer, even though I have a lot of summer knitting plans. And yeah, so transition. So I do have a lot of projects that I want to knit for the summer, and it's a bit silly because I had everything organized. Like I had my queue, and I even made a video for my Patreons in a little vlog where I share my plans, the yarns that I plan to use, etc. And I said, look, I'm gonna knit all of this summer, and I have the yarn and everything, and it's all decided, etc. And I did warn my Patreons that they shouldn't trust me. But about like a couple of hours after I filmed this portion of the Patreon vlog, I saw a design on Instagram and I was like, nope, forget everything. This is what I want to make right now. And it is the Rockhound vest by Wool and Pine, which completely messed my queue and just went straight to the top of the to-do list. It is a top-down V-neck vest or sleeveless top, and yeah, it's absolutely lovely. So it features this beautiful motif, lace and twisted stitches, which I really, really like. I really like it. This center one, I've seen it used quite a bit lately. I think Sari Nordlund has a sweater pattern with it, which is beautiful, and it's really fun. So you start with the shoulders here at the top, and then you work the back with this motif. So the pattern is charted, and here as well you can see that those are bands. So it's fairly easy to track because you can put markers if you want, but if not, you can just see where the purls are. And whenever you reach a section of 2 or 3 purls or knits, if you're on the wrong side, you're like, oh, okay. You can see that you've skipped to the other vertical band. And it is absolutely a joy to knit. It combines some of my favorite stitches, like this mock eyelet cable here, which I love, which is very easy to do. The twisted stitches, etc., the smock here. And also, I'm very happy because people make fun of me for the way I do my smock stitches, because I hate cable needles. I really do. So you could do smock stitches by slipping your stitches on a cable needle and wrapping the yarn around that. I really don't like using cable needles, so I just slip all of my stitches and I bring the yarn back and forth and I do this, and it's very long to do and it's silly, just because I don't want to use a cable needle. But in the pattern instructions, they also tell you to do it like this. So I'm not the only one. I feel validated in my hate of cable needles. But yeah, really, really immersive to knit. It's just, it requires the right amount of attention without being complicated. It's just so much fun, and it goes so fast because I'm so into it. And yeah, so then you do some armhole increases here. You see that there's a little difference here. We'll talk about this. And then you get the fronts. So the pattern has you do provisional cast-ons everywhere, like here for the shoulders, etc. This is the anti-provisional cast-on episode. I just don't like it. I don't mind picking out stitches. I kind of like it. And I will always prefer to do this, especially for a summer top. And since I'm using cotton, which we'll talk about in a minute, I prefer to pick up for more structure. So I picked up for the front, and then you make the front and you make the V neck increases, and it's all charted, so that you don't have to make it yourself. It's much harder to follow a pattern, to maintain a pattern when increasing than when decreasing. Decreasing is easier, and so this is nice because you have the actual full chart with the motif laid out for you with the increases. And you do the armhole increases, etc. So basically I have finished the one front, and I'm gonna start another one. And then I'm gonna join in around and knit in the round. And the pattern at the end has you pick up around the neckline and the armholes and work twisted ribbing. So I have a row gauge problem again. So my row gauge is very wrong. My stitch gauge is fine, but my row gauge is wrong, and because of that I have to knit more rows. So your needle sizes does not matter. Like I think I'm using 3.25, but when the size of your stitches differ, it is because of your gauge. If you have the correct row gauge, you have the same stitch, the size is the same, so it's going to look the same and it's going to measure the same. So if you have to make more or less rows, it's because your row gauge is wrong, and it's not necessarily because you use a different needle size. You can use a different needle size and still have the right gauge, stitch and row wise. I say this because I often have people very confused because they can't get the right gauge with the recommended needle size in some patterns. And that it's not your fault. You're not doing anything wrong. The pattern is not wrong. This is normal. And using a different needle size, if you get the correct gauge with it, it doesn't change anything. If you need to make more or less rows, or if your stitches look looser, etc., it's because you're using either a different yarn or because you don't have the right gauge. That's it. Basically. And the problem with row gauge in particular is that it's so dependent on fiber as well. And depending on the type of yarn that you use, it's going to be very difficult to achieve row gauge. And I'm using cotton. The pattern originally is made with a wool blend, which looks absolutely lovely, by the way. But I wanted it to be a summer top, so I'm using cotton. And so my row gauge is much tighter. I have like 36, 37 rows per 10 centimeters, and the pattern calls for 30. And yeah, so this means that I needed to knit more. So I added the rows on the back before the armhole shaping, and that's fine. The problem is on the front, and that's the problem with V-necks, is that they're dependent on a certain number of rows, especially when there's a pattern, a motif. Because here the lace is charted with all the increases. It's put at the edge on purpose so that you shape the V, etc. And so I couldn't mess with that. I couldn't add rows. Like I would have had to redraw the entire chart, and I didn't want to do that. But lucky for me, there's a portion of stockinette at the top here of the shoulder. And initially it's not a lot of rows, and the tip of the motif here starts way higher here, but mine is going to be much lower because I had to put all of my extra rows, so I had to add 14 extra rows, and I had to put them all here at the top, basically. And at first I was worried that it was going to look bad, but I think it's better to have this stockinette portion, because once it's gonna have the twisted ribbing on either edge, it's still going to look okay. And I wanted to keep the overall look and fit, because the problem was the armhole depth, right? The pattern is graded in such a way that the armhole depth is very low, which is what you do when you want to make a vest. Especially, you may notice that vest patterns have very low armholes. This is because you just want more comfort if you're gonna wear a shirt underneath or something, or a dress. You need it to be lower, and this can be fixed later or adjusted later by picking up stitches for the armhole and working the ribbing. And initially, the armhole depth before the ribbing for my size was supposed to be 27 centimeter, and I barely had 22. So I was missing 5 centimeter, which is about 2 inches. And the problem is 22 centimeter is the armhole that I need, like the final opening that I need. Like, let's say if I have the armhole that is this deep, and if I add twisted ribbing, then it shrinks the opening, right? 22 centimeter is what I needed at the end, and that's what I had at the beginning. And so if I didn't modify this, I wouldn't have had any room to make any sort of edging. And I didn't want to do that because I kind of liked how like the large ribbing looks on the initial design. I've seen some projects made with finer necklines and ribbing, and I kind of don't like how they look. I could have made an I-cord, etc., but I did want the larger edging. So I had to adjust and add the rows. So hopefully it will be okay. I did pre-block the back just to check if I didn't gain room with blocking, because I'm using cotton, it's lace, even if it's lots of cables. There's also ribbing, which tends to widen a bit and lengthen, but it didn't move, just nothing. It didn't move at all. So that's why this part here is blocked and this part here is blocked. It kind of looks like there's a difference in color, which I hope it is not. Like my water was clear, like it was not no dye bled. So I think it's just that because my tension looks different when it's not blocked. You see? I think that's why it does this. When I look at it in real life, I don't see that much of a difference. But yeah. Yeah, that's how my top looks so far. I will join in around, work the body a little bit, and then I will try it on and do the finishing touches, just so that I'm sure that my modification worked. I haven't talked about the yarn I'm using. I'm using another Katya yarn. It's a Katya heavy moment here, which is cotton cashmere. So I've talked about how I've been trying different cottons and summer yarns. This is a fingering weight, which is great because this is what I'm looking for, fingering weight summer yarns. And this is 90% cotton, 10% cashmere. And it's really nice to knit. So I think it's the most pleasant cotton I've ever knitted with. My favorite summer yarn is Landlust Summerside, which is a cotton and silk blend. And it's a little bit of a rougher yarn to knit with still. This is so soft and very round, and it just slides, no issue. The thing is, it's so soft, and because of the cashmere and fuzzy, I wonder if it's not going to be, it's not going to feel as fresh, perhaps. So it might lose points on that side, because the Landless Summer side, the cotton silk blend, which I love, is so fresh to to wear. It's adorable. But yeah, maybe this with the cashmere is going to be a little bit more soft, maybe a little bit more fragile, we'll see. But knitting it is great. I absolutely love it. This is the color 79, which is a nice medium green. I don't know that it's the best green for me. It's okay, I think. It's not too yellow, so I think that's fine. But it is beautiful. It has a great definition. It's not splitting a ton. It's splitting because of the stitches, like the twisted stitches, the purl through the back loop, etc. That's when I'm twisting it. But even so, I'm not twisting it so much. So pretty good on that side as well. And yeah, I'm having lots of fun with this project, and I can't wait to wear it. And yeah, that is it for this episode. I have shared all that I wanted to talk with you about, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed my rambling about row gauge, and I thank you so much for watching. I hope you are having a really nice spring or autumn time, and I wish you a very happy rest of the day, evening, whenever you're watching this, and I will see you next time. Bye!